call the meeting to order. Now we're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance.
You guys start off.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good.
Is there someone who would like to make a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
Does it matter who?
It can be city council.
This is Janet. I move to approve the agenda as written.
This is Sue, I'll second.
I got a question here real quick. Where's Robin?
Robin is on the screen.
Oh,
Marsha Wood.
Robin, can you turn on your camera if possible?
I just thought that you had to have the quorum.
Yeah.
Yes, he's the
He will be.
the quorum. And then I call for the vote.
Where do you want to start? Which end?
No,
Over here, okay.
all for the agenda?
Yeah, don't you?
Yes.
He always does.
Yes, we do.
Planning Commission or all of us?
All of us, because it's a
It was
joint meeting.
Ron,
Got it.
Ron, aye.
Sue, aye.
Janet, I.
Scott, aye.
Rabbi.
Bethany, aye.
How about the,
Robin, aye.
Oh, yes. Sorry, Robin. And
I
Jesse.
don't know how to turn on my camera.
And Jesse. Oh, he's muted.
Yeah. No, it's Jesse.
He wasn't muted just a second ago.
Jesse, can you unmute?
Tell them to hold up 2 fingers.
Yeah, or
Thumb up
can we
or
do it
thumb
the old
down?
Roman way?
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, he
I'm
left.
fine with it.
He's getting technical support.
Okay.
Comes.
Yep, here comes technical support.
Joe.
We're laughing with you.
There it is.
Sorry, this is Jesse. I just unmuted it. I vote aye, of course. Sorry.
Can I get a motion to approve the August 7th, 2024 joint meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
This is Sue, I'll second.
And I'll call for the vote.
Supposed to ask if there's any discussion.
Oh, I am? Discussion? Anyone?
Okay, Ron, aye.
Sue, I. Janet, I.
Scott, aye.
Rabbi.
Robin, aye.
Jesse, aye.
And Bethany, aye. And then a motion to approve the September 4th, 2024 joint meeting minutes.
I motion that we approve those minutes.
I'll second it.
And I'll call for the vote.
Ron, aye.
Sue, I. Janet, I.
Scott, aye.
Rabbi.
Jesse,
Robin,
aye. Oh, sorry.
Robin, aye.
Great.
And Jesse, aye.
Right. There, we will have a public open forum. Will you read the, nope. What do I say next?
Just ask if anybody,
Does anybody have anything to say at the public open forum?
you can ask on Zoom.
Anyone on Zoom?
Hearing none. Close it.
Hearing none, we will close the public hearing.
Forum.
Public forum, sorry. Now, a public hearing for the Woods of E&B Plat. Now will you read the notice, Eleanor?
Yes, I will. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held
Doing great.
by the City of Columbus Planning Commission on Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024 at 6 p.m. or as soon thereafter as parties may be heard. The hearing will be conducted in person and by interactive technology at the Columbus City Hall, located at 16319 Kettle River Boulevard, Minnesota, to consider a request for a preliminary and final plat, Woods of E&B, creating one new residential lot. Members of the public interested in attending in person, monitoring the meetings, or wanting more information should contact city offices at 464-3120 or visit the city website at columbusmn.us. The hearing shall continue until all evidence and testimony has been received.
Now will the applicants please come forward? And state your name and address into the microphone, please.
I'm Adam Janetsky at 9367 189th Street in Columbus, Minnesota.
I'm Sherry Janetsky, 9367 189th Avenue Northeast, Columbus.
I'm Thea Janetsky, 9367 189th Avenue Northeast in Columbus.
Thank you. I don't.
They just ask them what they're planning.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, do you just want to go over? I think we've talked about this before, so I feel like if you just want to give a quick.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do is subdivide a 5-acre chunk to meet the Columbus minimums of 5-acre lots and put a single-family residence on that 5-acre lot. It'd be in the, kind of southwest corner of the lot, if I'm envisioning and directionally remembering that right.
Does anybody have any questions for them?
Well, I guess my question is, so there's, the ordinance is that they can only have 2, but they want to have 3.
Yep.
Is that right?
So currently, their lot is 40 acres, and it's about 40 acres, and it has no road frontage. And the access to it is a driveway that cuts through the property that does have road frontage, cuts through there and goes up to the 40 acres in the back. And by ordinance, you can only have 2 houses off of one shared driveway. Back in March, we heard them before to grant them a variance to allow this plat to be considered in the future. To allow a third residence to go off of that shared driveway, since this shared driveway cannot be expanded into a full-scale private road due to wetlands and also,
the idea was to try and keep the impact on the surrounding environment as minimal as possible. So in order to make that an actual road, you'd have to actually tear up a lot of wetland and beautiful property to make that possible. So to punch one more house in there, which is really the way the land is back there, you're kind of limited to that being really the only addition that's going to be possible back there. So any future development of that land would be unprofitable for sure.
Yeah.
There's not a good motive to do it.
And we're looking to keep land in the family and build a smaller retirement house for eventually when we retire and be able to have that out there.
So they can take care of Grandpa Joe.
Exactly. Perfect. So you're not actually subdividing the land. You just want 3 driveways so you could put 3 houses.
I know it gets confusing. You think it's 3, it's still 2 lots. That's what they're taking, 2 lots, but they're allowing a third driveway that the owner has. I know it's confusing. At first, I thought the same thing. You were splitting it into 3. You throw 3 in, it's just 3 people, 3 residents using 1 driveway.
They already have 2 people sharing a driveway, so now they would be adding a third.
Yep. Okay.
So they're subdividing into 2.
Yep.
Is any further comments?
Well, I just have a question on this. So on the drawing, we have, and this is the driveway, because here's the road. The driveway goes back to this. Is this the new driveway, or what's different than what you have today?
To see what you're looking, which one you're looking at, because you can see there.
That's the existing driveway that's already there.
That's the existing driveway that we're just going to use. We're actually going to come off before that other residence. So we're coming in kind of about halfway of the drawing you're seeing there. And that's not the road, that's the corner of the property. Like in that lower left corner, That's actually a property boundary between the Nelson Acres and that Township 33, I think is what they're calling that. The driveway continues to go down alongside that Nelson Acres to the road front on 189th.
Okay.
And you can see that the 50 by 50 building, that's the proposed house location.
So this whole 40 acres, it goes on further than this, is landlocked, I assume? Yeah, that's the phrasing. This driveway goes all the way down to the road, but it already, the property here uses it, and then it comes up here and goes to this house. So that's already 2.
Oh, gotcha.
And that's our limit.
That's where the other
And
one
this
is.
plat is adding another, it's subdividing this 5 acres out, adding another home, which is a third on the driveway. They did receive that variance. We've already told them that they can do this. This is the formal subdivision, the formal plat that they have prepared for it.
Okay. Thank you.
Say, I have a question for staff. On this, under staff recommendations, it says a maintenance agreement for the driveway will be executed and approved by the city. If there's a disagreement in the future, if it gets passed on or sold to somebody outside the family, that's perpetual with the property, I'm making the assumption. Who enforces any disagreements or problems with that agreement on driveway maintenance? Does the city enforce that somehow, or is that just a civil matter?
It would be a civil matter. We're approving it because we need to make sure that everything is correct in that, but it is turning over that maintenance to be shared amongst these 3 owners. It's not our road to maintain. If there's a disagreement, it's between those 3 owners, and it passes down when the property is sold.
Thank you.
All right, if there is nothing else, do we have to make a motion to close the public hearing, or do I just close it?
You can just close it.
All right, we'll close the public hearing if no one has anything else to say. Great. Public hearing closed. Now we'll have a presentation and discussion on the cannabis ordinance. So
We got to make a vote.
Are you going to vote?
Yeah, we got to,
Oh, make a motion.
is that just the planning commission then, and then it comes to us, or we?
Or motion to approve,
Yeah.
or motion
Planning
to,
Commission.
Yep.
Got it,
And
got
then
it, got
it'll
it.
come to us at council.
so since we've closed it, yes, then will someone make a motion to recommend this to city council?
This is Scott. I'll motion to recommend it to the city council.
This is Robin, I'll second.
And I'll call for the vote.
Scott, aye.
Robin, aye.
Bethany, aye. Motion passed, approved, great. Okay, now, presentation and discussion. Yes, cannabis ordinance? Oh, you guys can, you're done. Thank you.
Oh, and
You can stay there all night because I don't know what I'm doing.
Jack, is this on our agenda for next week in case they want to show up?
I will put it on the agenda for next week. Your final approvals will be at the city council meeting next week.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for laughing in there.
So yes, presentation and discussion. Cannabis ordinance.
Greetings. It's nice to be here in person. So I wanted to only talk about 3 or 4 things, and I'm conscious of time. Last meeting, I think we were cutting each other off about 9 o'clock. We'll get out of here well before then. But in addition to your packet is a copy. I think you had my questions for clarification in your original packet, and last Friday we got a response. And I honestly anticipated that this would be the kind of response we have. And I'm just going to walk through this quickly because you may not have had a chance to even look at it. If you scroll down in either that email that I received or in the original questions for clarification, I had 3 issues. And the main one is a conflict between existing statutes. The The state's planning enabling legislation has been around forever. There's a provision that I cite in the end of that issue number 1 that says inconsistent special laws or general laws of special application are superseded by these land use laws that exist at record. My question to them was, is there something in the new cannabis legislation that supersedes that? They didn't answer any of that. They didn't answer any of it.
The answer, we don't know.
They don't even have a phone number. I saw in the newspaper a media person and it had a phone number. That's the only number. I talked to this guy and started going down my list and he goes, "You lost me. I got to pass this on to somebody else." I said, "Good, give me a name and number." "No, you have to send an email." So these people are, I don't want to berate them, but as a new agency, I don't know any of them. And you can't confront them personally. So one of the other things that was included in the handout that you got today, they reference in response to issue 1, well, look at pages 15 to 17. This is the local approval process. Well, it doesn't say anything. Those were the substance of my questions, that by law, they're saying we have 30 days to receive a referral from them to approve this, and if they don't hear from us in that time frame, they have the right to approve it. And my mere question was, where's our 60-day process? And if you had a chance to read it, my conclusion was, okay, so I think what you're talking about is, quote, a pre-application process, and you want us to respond in 30 days. And then when they have a full application, we do our normal 60, 120 day.
Okay.
One of the things that is bothersome that I cited in here, it says that license pre-approval does not require a location. So how do we make a certification in 30 days that they refer to us saying we have a retail application from this party and there's no site? It can't be done. I'm sorry. They want you to, the last thing that they sent on the back of the handout that you received tonight is a new supplement, and I reread everything that was in this guide. And I looked at the top of the pages and the bottom of the pages to make sure there was nothing new. This is all that they inserted, is this one-page retail registration form and checklist. Earlier I said, when is it that the Office of Cannabis Management and the local units of government are going to get together to produce this? Well, they just sent it. I'm not aware they asked anybody to get involved in it. And it says, you know, here's the type of referrals that you may get: micro business, meso business, or retailer, and what the license registration fee can be and what an annual renewal may be. And then there's a question that they're current on all property tax. If you receive a pre-application and they haven't picked the site, how do you even determine they're up to speed with taxes? So they did not answer any of those questions. The next section of answers that they gave in here had to do with cannabis events. And many of these came from your own questions. Well, are we talking about tents like snow days or hay days? What was that called?
Yeah, 8 days.
By Sue's house?
Yep.
Can we require these in brick and mortar facilities? And the pat answer, you just read this first response that they have on the bottom of the first page of the new handout. Minnesota statute 342.13 subdivision C states, well, I know this, I'm reading all this stuff, and it says we can adopt reasonable restrictions of the time, place, manner of operation, provided that our restrictions do not prohibit the establishment or operation of a business. So there's a lot of latitude, as this says to me. And then their pat answer is, we recommend you consult your local attorney for these answers. Well, I've been in the business 40-some years now, and I can tell you, I can call 4 attorneys and get 4 opinions. That's why we have judges and courts. Nobody has the same answer. So this is very frustrating, and we're not going to resolve this until the very end. But I don't want to spend more time. Hopefully you had a chance to look at these. Do we have to allow tents, temporary structures out in a cornfield? And then they have to satisfy all kinds of fencing, parking, lighting, security provisions. And this is for a 4-day event, and it's going to be outdoors. Why don't they know the answer to this? You go down the list. Are these event organizers that are referenced in the statute, do they have to be licensed locally? Are we going to get a referral, or can somebody from Thief River Falls that is an event organizer plan an event? And then their next answers, event organizers are not required to register locally. It is important to note that the statute includes specific reference to the requirement for local approval. That's all they say. Well, no, the statute didn't say it because I couldn't find it, but it says they have to get local approval. We asked, can we put a limit on the number of events? So this party from Thief River Falls wants one every 3 weeks. Do we have to do that? Well, there's nothing in the statute that puts a limit on this, but it's important to note cities can have reasonable restrictions as long as they don't prohibit the business or the operation of the business. So no answers. I asked because this question came up. The micro business is allowed as a part of the statute on-site consumption, but it's limited to edibles. So they can't smoke, they can't vape. There's no alcohol, there's no tobacco. So this is like a lounge where you can have gummies or drink a beverage. They can be the potent ones, not the low potency hemp that you can buy at Holiday right now. It'll be the real deal. My question was, at these events, it gives us the option to allow consumption. So can we restrict that consumption to just edibles? Do we have to allow, or may we allow smoking the flower or vaping the product? And their answer in this simply says it's up to you. You can do this. So at least that question that was raised at our last meeting has been answered. We don't have to allow any consumption. You can restrict the consumption similarly that they have to the micro business, that it's edibles only and not smoking or vaping. But the laws governing all of these are clear for any consumption that's allowed. There's no tobacco and there's no alcohol. That's consistent. So when we think about having an event, how often, whatever, we can restrict it as openly or as closed as you want. No consumption, or just edibles, or the real deal. That's up to us. So when I said they didn't answer any of my questions, they did answer that one. The last thing that we talked about, given our ability to restrict this to one retail in our city, since we're under 12,000 population, or if we decided to allow 3, 5, whatever the case, by ordinance, can we reverse that? They don't answer that. We recommend you consult with your attorney about it. So I can't answer that either, but the purpose of this was the questions that we raised in our first 2 joint meetings, and then all of mine related to the conflict between a 30-day checklist of a referral from the state. We'll now refer this. I talked to Jack and Eleanor, and we'll get Megan involved, especially now that we have, and I do want to talk about that tonight, a draft ordinance. It's clearly not done. It's just to give you an idea where we go. And then we'll turn all this over to Megan, and one of these meetings, whether she answers in writing or comes, we'll see what happens. It's bothersome to me. One of the items that I highlighted, they have a website that says frequently asked questions. So these FAQs have a variety of things, and they're not geared to local government. They're all geared to retailers, cultivators, people asking questions, what they do here. It emphasizes that there must be license pre-approval, but it doesn't require a site. So somebody can apply to them for either a cultivation or a retail or a micro, meso business manufacturer under the pre-application provision without having a site. And then one of their follow-ups said that once you survive the lottery and you get this pre-application, then you have to get a full license from the state. So they are talking about pre-application and final application. And they imply that it is between the pre-application and the final that they've got to come here and get whatever we have, conditional use permit, whatever the requirement is. But they still don't answer how we do a checklist in 30 days under the pre-application if it doesn't have to be site-specific. And you'll note one of their answers said, well, we encourage all of our applicants to work closely with local units of government.
Yeah, that don't know what's going on.
They don't know where the site is. They don't know anything.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm going to jump to what I had in my original notes to talk about. In August was a cutoff for the pre-application process. They received 1,817 pre-applications.
Wow, just in the whole state?
Between mid-July and, yeah.
Okay.
And these are limited, the pre-applications are limited to social equity applicants, those that have suffered from the past evils of our cannabis laws in the past and whatever. I can't really describe what the social equity applicants truly are. A lot of the naysayers who want to get involved in this business will say, well, they're criminals. They've been deprived of normal rights because they had a cannabis problem before it became legal. I can't answer that, so don't ask me the question. But this pre-application period, which was announced earlier, from mid-July to mid-August, was just for the social equity applications. And they received 1,817. I just got this 2 days ago. 586 were for micro businesses. 578 were for retailers. There's no cap on micro businesses. So out of these applications, we don't know the vetting process of the state and how many they will say passed the pre-application. And then at some point, they'll forward those to us. But if it is a micro, that has a retail component, and they're going to forward a pre-application for a micro facility to us under this presumed 30-day checklist. And my response now, and I'll confirm this with Megan or whomever, is that we're going to sit here and say, no, it doesn't pass our test. It fails. It's not site specific. We can't check property taxes, anything. Leave it at that.
So
and let them come back.
Yeah, I have a question about that. So those are ones that the state has already gotten, and could they potentially send them to us if somebody wanted one here in Columbus before the end of the year?
I'm glad you asked that. There's just so many moving targets.
Because we do have a moratorium still until the end of...
And the rules are not established. They don't expect the rules to be adopted until early 2025. They don't expect any referrals to local units of government until after the rules have been adopted. So we got a month, 2 months, 6 months in the new year. So yes, our moratorium is in place. They're going through their vetting process, and so on 578 retailers, their cap is only 50. So let's say 200 of these retail applications, they vetted properly and said, okay, they're going to put them in a bowl and pick numbers, and they're going to select 50 out of those in the lottery. They are not going to refer these to us until the rules have been established, and that's next year.
Okay, good.
There were 372 mezzo business applications, and the cap on those is 10. So if they were lucky to get 50 legitimate mezzo businesses, they're going to have to go through the lottery to whittle that down to 10. They received 45 applications for manufacturing, and there's a cap at 24. And they received 57 cultivator applications, and that cap was at 50. So that one's relatively close. But you can see the early interest in this: 586 micro, 578 retailers, 372 mezzos. That's 80% of all these 1,800 applications are in the retail world.
And that's statewide?
And that's anywhere in the state.
Sure.
Yes.
Say, Dean, can you share where you got that information? I can't write fast enough.
I have the copy, and I failed to bring it. We're babysitting our granddaughter, and at the last minute when I walked out of the house, I didn't grab that file. That's a new one. Otherwise, I could have sent that along with this other stuff you got, but I got that last Friday. This just came out. It was in an email to me Monday? No, it wasn't Monday. I think it was yesterday. In any event, I will send that to everyone.
Oh, okay.
And that has this breakdown. And it explains again whether there are caps in place, exactly how many, you can see where that is. And they distinguish. These are, we've known this. This is the social equity pre-application phase only. They have only set caps on registrations at this stage. I think I sent that out at the last time, and those caps may be expanded in 2025. What we don't know is if all of the caps that were put on these licenses will be occupied by social equity. And then there is no regular application process until they open the floodgates and increase the number of caps. So there, as we talked last time, the medical combination businesses, the truck drivers, delivery services, testing, the event organizers, none of those had caps on them. But there were very few other applications that came in at this time. And so, again, the state's feeling their way through this. They didn't answer my questions. So I'm going to sit down with Megan, and we're going to find out what we can about that information. And you want to say hello or listen? Just observing?
I don't want to jump in and not know what I'm jumping into exactly. I was just, sometimes I open my mouth and called out.
I only offered because this is a joint meeting of the Planning Commission and the City Council. It's open to the general public.
Well, I'm Joshua Sturman. I went to Columbus Elementary School since the 2nd grade. It's got a little 1975 block on there, same year I was born. I graduated out of course in 94, and I'm still acting like it. But those stuff is like, that's crazy, this. And so my parents are still on this side, and so I was just looking at the whole interconnectivity of just different things and some of the abstract properties that it's kind of ridiculous, the amount of the stuff that was involved in the forming of Coon Lake and kind of the merger between Columbus, when it was Crow Township, and some of them. There was one of the things I noted was there's such little idiosyncrasies. But there was when they first moved over into that section 36 that is the Coon Lake, was from the section 45 in Columbus. And so there was one that was from where it was 33, but then 22.
Josh?
Can I interrupt?
Josh, do you remember me?
Jack.
How you doing? We're talking about an ordinance here. If you could let us finish that, then I can talk to you after the meeting.
Absolutely. That's why I didn't want to just like jump in all
right.
without really knowing. I figured because sometimes I can fly up and go all over the place, but I didn't want to be rude and not be like.
No, I just wanted to acknowledge, since you're our only visitor, that you're welcome to be here. But the nature of what I think you might be asking would be better placed on a regular meeting agenda, since this is an ordinance discussion. So at that, we'll exclude you from participation, but you're welcome to listen and
As
we'll
an observer
continue.
type of a thing, because that was another thing for like the Zoom types of things for the whole collect, because that was the next thing, was like, how do you like, relabel yourself beyond just an observer for the Zoom that's coming up for the Tyler versus Hennepin.
Yep, so you're welcome to listen, but from now on, no more interruptions. Thank you. So the pre-applications, I don't honestly know if they thought this was a big number, a small number, if they were anticipating this. Keep in mind, these are the social equity applicants only, and the pre-application process for them is closed. It closed in August, and so this is it. Now it remains to be seen if they're in the state's vetting process of these different applicants, if they come close to the qualifications that the statutes require for them to be in the pool, and if so, then presumably out of 578 retailers, you'd think maybe 50 survived, and that would start this process, so that when the rules are completed, we're going to get some of these, and the maximum will be based upon the number of caps that were placed on these different businesses. I'll mention another element in the city of St. Paul. They identified that they currently register, and this will be a question coming up for you to talk about when we get to the draft ordinance, 178 low-potency hemp businesses. And again, you can buy this at Holiday right now, and we don't license or regulate it. The state is going to create, but they haven't yet, a registration program for the low potency. And a question is, that becomes optional for cities if they're going to get into some sort of licensing for the low potency, or if you're strictly going to stick with the retail and other business applications that come in. But they've already got, and they are registering them, and the bigger cities tend to do that just under 200, 178 scattered all around. They tend to be bars, convenience stores, grocery stores, and some craft beer places that are making their own low potency. I didn't mean to diverge, but I thought you'd be interested in these pre-applications. And again, my frustration going back to not having the answers from the state how this process is going to go. But my sense is we're going to fill out a form, and this might be the final one. And if they don't have a location on it, we're going to have to say it fails, because we can't determine if their taxes are current, and we can't determine if it's in a district that we have established for this to go on. And if we deny it within that time frame, they can't approve it. So
meaning the state. Okay.
So, and again, the state in their frequently asked questions category says, well, now keep in mind, folks, the pre-application is not a license. You have to go and find your location, get your financing, get whatever, and then go talk to the locals. So again, how the state published all this in this 30-day process conflicting with our 60-day is aggravating. I know, Scott, I think you said you went to that website on that one Friday a month ago. The woman from St. Paul was the only one that said, how can you guys have this 30-day? Where's our 60-day? She zipped it. And St. Paul just adopted an ordinance. You can find it. I have it. It's not terribly relevant to us, and I'll explain just a couple of things that give you some thinking points about our own ordinance. They mapped out their entire city and said, where are all the schools? And then they mapped out where are all the retail businesses. And then they showed where their existing low potency are. And they chose not to be 1,000 feet from schools, but 300, because if they went 1,000, they would have eliminated like 80 or 90 businesses that were already established in the city. So they didn't go up to the maximum that the state allows us to do. It's not relevant in our case. We don't have any of these facilities. You might have a daycare someday, but we don't have rehab facilities and schools that are within 500 or 1,000 feet from any of our commercials, so it's not a big deal for us. But in a big city like St. Paul with a lot of businesses, and I just read an article about Minneapolis going through this process, and they're not discouraging going over, one per 12,500. They'll take as many as they get. They're looking at this as another retail initiative. But all of these communities license these businesses currently, and I think part of it is revenue driven as well. You're going to collect $1,000 a year, whether it's worth it for your efforts for one or two of these, when you have to go out and have from 18 to 21-year-olds going in and attempting to purchase. You've got to do that once a year. There are some other spot checks that you do to make certain that they're compliant. But if you had 200 of these, that's $200,000. And then you say, gee, we can hire an inspector for that. They can go to one a day. That's 200 business days in a year. That's great. So there's a lot of different objectives and attitudes how people might be pursuing things. You have a question, Ron?
Well, I don't know. It's confusing. But this 45 manufacturers and 57 cultivators, does that shock you, that number, so low? I thought everybody would want to start.
But these are just social equity applicants, so they haven't opened it up to everybody yet.
To the regular population.
Oh, it's the regular population gets in there.
Yeah, be 10
But
times
does that
that
cap
number.
just go for the social and that's it?
For this stage of the process, and then they're going to establish what they think would be the limits. I've looked at a lot of communities in states that have legal cannabis. Someone may have indicated at our last meeting that, all of the business interest in this is from out of state. It's from the states where they're established. They are national entities. In part, it is because they know how to grow, they know how to manufacture, they got the financial backing for these facilities. If you or I were going to investigate, should we apply for a manufacturing or even the cultivation, we'd be out of our league. And yet there are a number of people who are already involved in cultivation and manufacturing. We have a medical cannabis establishment in the state. They're going to remain credible, and they probably will expand into the non-medical categories. But there are people building 80 to 100,000 square foot facilities to do indoor cultivation, the manufacturing, wholesaling. I don't remember any of them got into retailing, but they're big modern facilities under roof and a huge investment. And so social equity applicants, I don't think are in that league. When this opens up to others, I think you are going to find a lot of out-state interest and businesses that have experience and have got financial backing. I don't think we're going to find the run-of-the-mill that, flipping a coin, should I apply for a cultivator or manufacturer or maybe a wholesaler? It's going to be people that are experienced in this, because there's 13 or 14 other states that are already doing this. We'll see. But this application process and these numbers right now are strictly limited to the social equity phase. And somebody asked, was I surprised? I guess I was. That's a lot of applications. How many will get vetted and be realistic, and will they exceed the caps? I don't know. And this isn't a concern to us other than we're moving along in this continuum. We're going to get a referral someday, and I want to make sure we all agree how we're going to respond to the referrals. And I think we have to take a position that if somebody can't tell us where the location, what the facility is, we can't answer this, and it fails. But we have to do that in 30 days to meet the state law. And that'll be a staff effort that simply says, we don't know. I think once they get beyond this pre-application phase, they may either change that procedure so that it coincides with the existing enabling legislation for zoning in this state. I don't know. I mean, they made a lot of changes in legislation this year because last year's efforts raised a lot of questions. So don't be surprised with additional changes in the legislation again this year. And it's very difficult. You can't go to the state website and download a combined 23 and 24 legislative session. You get strike through and underlined documents, and so you have to, when you are looking at 40 different sections of the statute that end up being applicable to us. These are the licensing and the registration requirements for all 11 businesses. It's for the responsibility for local governments. You got to go in the 24 session and look up each one, and if there's an amendment, then you got to print that separately and then combine them. And it's
oh my gosh,
it's a nightmare. It's a lot of work. And so anybody that's not familiar with it or that process is going to struggle, and things are going to fall through the cracks. But even somebody that follows this like I have, and I'm not an attorney, and we'll get your attorney involved in this, it's an expensive proposition because it's a lot of paperwork. I have 150 pages of the statutes, and you got to cross-reference. I've got them attached together, and you read something, and I make notes on the original and say subdivision 15 amended, or I do my own strike-through underline. It's a can of worms. So, you want to talk about your draft ordinance?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Who does this office report up to?
I'm sorry?
Who does this office report up to in the state? Who's above them? Is it the Attorney General, or who's above them?
So the departments, there is a Department of Administration that works with the governor and the constitutional officers that would address or answer questions like this. Conflicts are going to be, first of all, organizations like League of Minnesota Cities, and I don't see them putting forth questions like I did. I mean, I don't get it. That's who they represent, us cities. The Office of Cannabis Management indicates that they worked with the County Association and the League of Cities to develop the model ordinance. The model ordinance doesn't sift through this. So locally, my first, and Jack and I have talked about this, is to pass on my questions, and whatever draft ordinance, whenever we want to do that, get that to the city attorney and have them respond to these questions. Whenever there's new legislation, they have to do the same thing I do. So you're going to have a second set of eyes, and if they're not doing this for other cities, it's going to be a lot of time devoted to answering this for you. It's unfortunate. But that'll be the first one. And as I said, I work with attorneys in a lot of cities, and I just have to smile throughout my career that they all disagree on what the outcomes are. And whether it is annexation battles, which I've been involved in, holy cow, you hire experts on both sides of it, you clash, and you ultimately go to an administrative law judge who comes to a resolution. And afterwards, the attorneys go and have a drink and got fat wallets. It's aggravating. This is aggravating. So for us, the biggest question, did you have more on that?
No, I just want to know who they report up to, because I think the way they've been handling this is ridiculous. And I think that whoever their boss is should be told that. Whether it makes any difference or not, that's not the point. I think we can sit here and talk about how ridiculous it all is, but, they should be held accountable, and they can't be held accountable if the next layer up doesn't know about it.
And I think our next step, honestly, is to get, we have competent attorneys. We get them to follow up and simply say, yeah, this doesn't look right. Or, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. I'd like somebody to take a forceful, positive attitude that I have. This is the way we're going to do it. If we get challenged, you got insurance. Let them sue us, and that's how laws get combined and changed. In the interim, if the city attorney says, "I agree with Dean. This is kind of a can of worms, and yes, this is the direction you ought to go," then maybe answering those questions isn't quite so critical. But for me, I can't answer to you. And I want to tell you, I don't care what attorney it is, if you pose questions like I posed to the state, they're not going to give you an answer today. They're not capable. And so we're not going to get the magic bullet response back. This is going to take time. And they're going to talk to other attorneys, and there's going to become consensus. And ultimately, somebody's going to build up what they did in the last session, and that is a bunch of amendments. And whether they pertain to the stuff we care about, our local authority. Again, I don't see where this legislation says it supersedes our planning and zoning authority. I just don't find it. Now, Megan might sit and say, oh yeah, this is X. I'm not aware of it. And I've worked with 40 attorneys in my career, and I love some of them dearly, and I wouldn't talk to some of them ever again. They're all over the map, and it's frustrating. And so right now, you've had the same attorneys for a while. I think we all agree the next step is to have them come back and say, I don't know why I didn't put this all together. Here's the answers, and they lay it out on the table. That'd be great.
I'm pretty sure they're not going to do that. But,
not gonna get it.
when you're putting together these ordinances, and everybody here knows this, it takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money. So the idea of having to change it multiple times because the state hasn't gotten their act together on this is really frustrating. So I don't think we should be spending our city's resources on redoing something because they can't make up their mind. And that's my point about raising this up to the next level.
So I don't have a good answer for you. I think sequentially the individual departments in the state, agriculture, housing, transportation, doesn't matter what they are. Somewhere the Department of Administration and then the constitutional officers are the ones that do whatever. And the Attorney General is certainly one of those. And could a city compose a question and say, this seems like nonsense, would you resolve this for us? That'd be a freebie. How long would it take? I can't tell you. I never got that far in the process. But I think there will be some changes. But I think a quick answer, well, you hold the purse strings for all of us that assist you. And I'm not saying that you need to open the checkbook to get answers for this, but I'm afraid you need to be conscious of that.
So would an option be to extend our moratorium?
You can't.
You can't, okay.
That was nixed in the law. And so you're good until January 1. So I think what we do is honor other statutes and let somebody else tell us that the new kid on the block trumps our requirements. I got to watch that term. It's political season. Supersedes our requirements. And again, they chose not to answer that question. And Megan may come back and say, I think they do. Or no, I don't see where they do, and this is an issue. And that's all the more reason for somebody to say, let's go to the Attorney General and get a straight answer. So what I'm doing, and the very first draft, and I said in my note to you, it's a very first draft. It is just an outline and some of the meat of what needs to be completed. And the very first thing I would say regarding the draft ordinance, if I can find where I put my copy, you'll see on page 1 of that, I've highlighted in yellow kind of either or scenarios. And even in the title, we've got Chapter 4 licensing in addition to the zoning regulations. So my sense is that there is no reason that you would not license cannabis retail. I don't know that there's authority or mechanisms for you to do that with the other businesses, but certainly the retail businesses for cannabis should be added as Article 10, cannabis retail, and we can debate and determine later whether temporary events. You already have temporary events, but I wouldn't use that category. I'd create a cannabis temporary event because those other temporary events are like a circus coming to town once every 12 years. This is something that could happen on a monthly, semi-annual, whatever basis. I'm not suggesting if you did create a temporary event licensing section in Chapter 4 of the code that you don't also require an interim use permit. Because if you license a cannabis retail business, you'll only issue the license for the sale of that information or material. You're not approving a conditional use permit for the brick and mortar facility and the property and everything else. So you could set them up very similarly where you establish categories just like tobacco sales, cigarette or liquor sales, but now it's cannabis retail and maybe a subsection or even Article 11, stand by itself, cannabis temporary event as a licensing function of the city. And then you'd have a two-stage approach. And we're already seeing that the state seems to imply that this licensing referral, well, gee, it ought to be simple. You all are in the licensing business. We don't license like St. Paul, Minneapolis, Bloomington, all the big cities. Most suburban communities do this through regular zoning. And I don't mean to say Lino Lakes or Forest Lake don't have liquor licenses. They do, and they probably would do this. But we need to segment them and have regulations in both Chapter 4 licensing as well as Chapter 7 zoning. So that, I don't see anybody disagreeing with that notion. I'm not going to go into any detail. I've looked at what basic items you would include in the licensing provision, but we'll come back perhaps at the next meeting and do that. So Section 1 of the ordinance would be where I have Section X, and the very first thing, just in sequence of the city code, we're going to do Chapter 4 first, and then we'll get into Chapter 7. So the new Section 1 will be what says X, and all the rest of these will become 2s and 3s and 4s, and we would move on. So Section 2 then, definitions. As you know, I've had, those of you that have known me longer than others, I get a little bone to pick about certain things. If I were to hand you, and I didn't bring the copy of statutes where they amend something, it's numbered 1 through 86 definitions. And when you insert one in the alphabet, so they're all, first of all, they're already alphabetizing them, and then they're numbering them in the margin. And then if you want to add something between animal and artifact, you end up using 1A, 1B. And I think you know this from your last editions of, I'm saying I want you to have an open mind and appease me in my old age and get rid of the numerical system that we use in front of definitions. We would keep the alphanumeric system for the subsections because we have a bunch of those. But we don't need to say adult use cannabis is 1 and adult use cannabis flower is 2 and 3. But then they've become 7A, 7B, 7C because we have this archaic system and the state statutes do it. And I think that's why your attorney in the 80s created a system like this. They even use things like articles and chapters, and most cities now have a simple ordinance, and it's section 1 through 100. And you dispense with this. So what I'm suggesting is my second section 1 that says, we're eliminating all numeric references in front of all existing definitions. And then when you adopt something, you're going to insert it in this code alphabetically, and you don't have to change it from number 11 to 11B.
I'm totally good with that.
If you're okay with that?
Yep.
Again, that has nothing to do with cannabis. It's just a bone I've had about your ordinance since the day I was here. So
let's change it now forever.
Okay.
That's it.
I'm
Until the attorneys
until
come in and then
until I'm gone.
Yeah.
I don't hear anybody disagree.
I like looking them up by the number.
You do?
I do, but that's me. And I'm in the minority, I know it.
And I notice now with your new method of minutes, every line is numbered 1 through whatever it is on the page. That's just formatting, and that is somebody's system. And like Scott, he might like that. Yeah, I'm not saying your minutes are flawed, but I noticed for the first time that's how you're getting them. And so you can say it's not paragraph 3, it's line 23. You left out the word X. So be it. But when you come back and amend something, and you're paying, first of all, the attorney to go in, or me, and go in and make corrections, and then you go give it to the attorney's codifier, and they've got to make the insertions. They're changing the entire section to make this fit, and it's utter nonsense.
How do you really feel?
So, get my drift?
Yes.
All right. Like I said, it's a pure bone to pick. I gave you a bunch of new definitions. They were in my global view that we looked at back in August. I've got a new one. When I read the City of St. Paul ordinance amendments, and I wish that it would be, I mean, you might like that document, and I can certainly make that available. Their ordinance is bizarre. And the way they do things, the big cities, is very different. It's hard to follow. They're making very few amendments to this. And they are, they created a table and they inserted where the retail, and we're doing that already. But one of the things that I noted in there, they had a definition for a volatile solvent. I don't think it was volatile.
A what solvent?
Volatile solvent. It's not in my list.
Oh, it's not in there.
That.
I was going to say, what the heck is that?
I looked it up in the statute, and by gosh, it was in there, and I think that's why they did it. And then I noted in one of their performance standards, and I would approach adding that. It says we don't allow solvents except in the, and they had about 6 industrial and whatever districts. So I'm suggesting, and whether you remember this now, but towards the end of this where I had all of the performance standards, I would add a new performance standard that makes reference to the use of volatile solvents, and then we will have added that definition, and it'll say they're prohibited except in the limited or the light industry and the general business district, wherever you're allowing manufacturing. And it may make us go back and say, well, gee, we had manufacturing or meso business, which can do manufacturing in the highway commercial. Do we want to allow volatile compounds in that district? That's just a policy decision, but it made sense to me. And these are alcohols and bufenols and things I don't know anything about, and they just say then another addition that I would make in here, that no matter the business, noise, odors, vibrations, solvents, whatever, don't escape or can't be discernible at the property line. I mean, we have that kind of reference already in the city code elsewhere, but we'll make it as a specific standard in here. But otherwise, without dwelling on all of these individual components of the ordinance, I'll go back, section 2, which is now section 3, are all of the different zoning districts that we agreed in the first 2 meetings that you would add as a conditional use, micro business or retailer in community commercial. And then as an interim use, the cannabis temporary. And we go down that list and they're all very similar until we get to the general business. So everything up through the horse racing district had micro business, retailer, and as interim use, the temporary event. And then only general business and the light industry included the things that might involve the solvents, the mezzo business, the manufacturing, and so forth. And so if you keep that context, and we're going to limit volatile compounds to those 2 zoning districts, then that's the intent of adding that definition and that as a performance standard. It would only occur in those 2. So when you pull out the zoning map and you say to yourself, all right, this is the retail area, and now these are the ones that we're limiting ourselves to manufacturing. That's mezzo and manufacturing, basically. Then that's the only place that you'd potentially have those solvents. The solvents are highly regulated by the state. As some of you have noted in past meetings, you don't have a lot of confidence in some of the regulators in the state, but they are. There are things that we can't do, and that's air quality, noise, and odors. The federal government, and water quality. We can't create standards for those, and so we let the state regulate them. In any event, we say in a lot of our conditional use permits for businesses out on Lake Drive, you can't have noxious this or that, or I can't remember the wording, toxic, hazardous waste and such. We'll say that. I also want to note, I had up to from A to Q performance standards. We're going to be adding other cross references about things of that magnitude, again, that are already in the city code that'll talk about other things. The more I have read about wastewater, and at our last meeting with the car wash, we talked about water consumption. I understand it isn't extraordinary, but I'm not the scientist, and I'm not going to sit and tell you to believe in me, but as I read other city information and resources, this is not the worst thing for you at this time would be to allow a pizza manufacturer. I used to work for the city of Maple Lake, and they have, well, there's about 8 labels, but it's a major frozen pizza manufacturer, and it occupies 70% of the problems in meeting their water quality requirements in their waste treatment plant. And it's an absolute hog for water in food businesses. I used to do some consulting for the city of Lakeville down in their huge Air Lake Industrial Park. There are a number of food businesses that are making non-hemp gummy bears and cereals and things like that. The city of Northfield, one of the old cereal capitals of the world, they're major users of water in their processing, but I'm not seeing that in the cannabis. The quantities used in the manufacturing tend to be so limited. I think your earlier questions, if you're extracting from hemp or the cannabis flower, the cannabinoids, I have a hard time pronouncing these terms too. That's where the volatile materials, I think, Rob, you hit on that. And they are highly regulated, but they're a minor part of the process. But you know, we got to allow them somewhere. We can't exclude them, and then we'll try to come up with the best regulations we can. But right now, I'm not seeing cities adding things other than the city of St. Paul saying the volatile compounds. So I didn't highlight anything in detail. If you had a chance to look at these in advance, I'm open for questions. We talk about in here the terms and definitions. If they're not in our ordinance, they're going to be in the state's definitions. Beyond that, when you go to court, if there's a word out there, the judge will say, well, what's the customary definition? Well, I haven't seen anything in this cannabis legislation that is a customary definition. They're all words a page and a half long. And I think we're covered in that regard, but it is something that needs to be said in this ordinance. If we fail to put it in here, all the state definitions apply. The other thing is, we're not going to be in a position to micromanage, in part because you don't have the staff and you don't want to try and get the expertise to do it. Out of 56 or 7 chapters of 342 legislation on cannabis, I'd say half are related to the technical requirements for getting a license through the state. And there's no reason for us to do that. We're simply going to say they have to comply with all of these statutes and the rules of the Office of Cannabis Management. And that is because those statutes are in way more detail and specificity that we normally have in zoning. And again, unless you want to hire a compliance officer, I don't think you want to get in that business. So we're going to have things that they have to have an active license to remain in business in our community. And one of the things that Megan, who is very familiar with licensing, would say is, then we want to make that reference clear in the license provision. And if those licensing provisions should be extended to other cannabis businesses like manufacturers, I don't know why you would wholesalers, because that allows you to stay on top of them better and you can charge an annual license fee, then that's a decision that might help you reach that point that you say, yeah, let's have more regulations. But my position now is they're going to be highly regulated. They're going to be monitored by the state. Our job is to get them through the land use and zoning process as best we can and not wear the hat of the state regulators. That's just my separation throughout my career. We can go into a lot of detail, but the more detail you want to do, and a lot of communities decided they wanted to have housing codes. Well, then they were paying $250,000 to $350,000 a year to have a housing inspector to follow up on the requirements of their own ordinance. And most of those cities, other than the big ones, have abandoned that approach. That's just a simple example because a lot of suburbs decided to go into the housing business and it was complaints that that apartment building really needs to be fixed up, and so you need to adopt an ordinance and you've got to be specific, and then you got to hire somebody that goes out and inspects. Because once you adopt that ordinance, you're going to get complaints that you can't believe. And that's why most suburbs, you didn't have a housing code in East Bethel, did you, Jack?
No.
No. Anyway, that's a comparison I would make to how far we want to go in this. But again, that's a policy decision that you would be making. I've indicated in here that we're going to have conditional use permits for all of these businesses. If they try to circumvent us, we're going to put that initial licensing 30-day business through the licensing ordinance. And if they can't tell us where the business is, we have to say it fails. It doesn't meet our requirements. And so that would be specified in the detailed requirements of our licensing provision.
So can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
I noticed that you had put in conditional use permits, but when I was looking through our minutes, we never agreed on that. And of course, I don't agree with it. So looking back on the minutes that we just approved, it said that you were going to go back and kind of research that, but we never agreed that we never came to any consensus about whether it'd be interim use or conditional use. So I think before we just assume that, there needs to be more discussion on that.
Yeah, and I'll just say what I'm seeing in a few of the bigger cities, the tables that they have, they're putting half of these cannabis businesses as permitted uses and the other half as conditional uses. I'm not even seeing any interim uses. I would argue that consistent with the state's intent for interim uses is that they have a specific timeline. And I realize we use these with, probably the best example is billboards. 25 years ago, when in fact a billboard did not necessarily have a specific timeline, they could last 40 years. Why did we do 20? That was a politically correct thing to do, that we weren't going to issue any more conditional use permits because they did live forever. But the law reads, if the state has issued a license to someone, that license exists until it's terminated by the state or by default through our own, but we have to go through a process to tell the state that they're in default, and then there's a correction period, not unlike what you have to do now if you find fault in any business or non-compliance with a code provision. So my comment is interim use permits were never intended for brick and mortar facilities. We use them for temporary activities, home-based business, which you've gotten rid of. We continue to use them on the billboards because nobody wanted the permanent protection under the conditional use. I made a note in here somewhere without looking it up, and it is in the state statutes, that none of these licenses are transferable. And so we have the authority, if somebody was changing a business location, that's not transferable. They have to go through our conditional use process. But I'll just say my piece. I don't think anything other than the temporary event should go through the interim use. That's just me. I don't believe, especially if someone were to, we get an out-of-state mezzo business that wants to come in and spend $1 million, and we're going to hide that as an interim use that we can terminate? I don't think so.
Well, they have to go through an annual renewal of their license anyway.
That's what I say.
So that, to me, lines up just perfectly with an interim use.
That's a license.
I realize the difference, Dean, but I'm just saying that it's not like once they get it's not like a typical business now where they get their approval through us and then they can go on forever with their CUP. So there's an annual review of their business anyway, so there's already uncertainty, if you want to call it that. And again, I'm only suggesting this because of what we just spent an hour talking about, which is the state can't frickin' make up their mind about what's going on. So why do we want to give somebody a conditional use permit, which is transferable with the land? So if things got more defined, I definitely would reconsider that stance. But I think that for the state of where things are now and knowing that they have to go through an annual renewal of their license, I don't know why we would grant conditional use permits.
So again, if the license is terminated for a business and they're not assignable to anyone else, then that business is gone. So we issue a conditional use permit for a retail business, and for either infractions of the state requirements or whatever, they lose their license, that conditional use permit is revoked.
I get that, but then they sell their business or their property to somebody else, they get the CUP, now that person gets to apply and it's back in business again if they get their license. And that's something that, this just gives us a little bit more control over bad actors or, problem properties. And again, until things are really better sussed out. The other question I have, which is different, is that I think we currently have an ordinance that prohibits smoking or vaping in public or public-facing entities. So like, for instance, you can't do it in the lobby of a hotel or out in front of the track, you can't do it. So how does that play out with the temporary events, if you were to allow that? So would we have to change that ordinance that we currently have on the books?
So the temporary events, which we don't have to allow smoking or vaping. But if you were to do that, they have to have a separate area. You're assuming it's private property, it's restricted to people over 21. It is not a public building like an apartment or a bank or an office.
Right.
It's different, and so they've categorized it differently, but the same approach to restricting tobacco, streets, sidewalks, parks, and public places would apply to the cannabis. And so how the temporary event gets by that is, number one, it's temporary. It's going to be somewhere confined by itself. And again, we have very few. Do they require vents and ceilings if it's indoors? I don't see any of those specifics in there. So I'm assuming these are geared up to like carnival atmosphere, and somebody's going to pop up a tent. And then if you were to allow that consumption, they have to have a separate tent, has to have a separate entrance from the retail sale area. The retail sale area has to have a separate area to store merchandise that is not reachable by the public. So there are many restrictions in there that tells me it's some warehouse building that somebody would lease, or as my question to the state asked, can we restrict these to other licensed facilities? So if it's a mezzo business, they already got a consumption area. If it is a mezzo or a micro or a I'm trying to think, who else has the retail? Or a retail store that was large enough, could they put an outside tent up outside the building, meet all the other requirements to prohibit anybody under 21, to keep retail sales separate from storage, to have a separate waste disposal component, and then if we allow the edibles, including vaping, it would be no different than going out behind Ajax Bar, and they got a tent out there, and you're allowed to smoke in that area. But it has to be secured. And so we're talking about somebody putting up a fair amount of money for fencing at a temporary event. And again, I don't have the answer to that. They didn't answer it. We are allowed to have reasonable restrictions. So I think at some point, you all can, ask the attorney, is this reasonable? We want to restrict it to a licensed facility. Well, what if you don't have any licensed facilities? Then are you restricting an event, which the law says we can't prohibit it? You don't have a licensed facility in town because there's only 50 retailers allowed. We have to have a provision somewhere for it. So I think the licensing component is safe, and I think issuing the interim use on the event is safe. But personally, I think it is a stretch for businesses, brick and mortar businesses that make investments, to attempt to require interim use permits. And that's me, and that becomes a policy decision. And so Janet has all the authority, and she's good at it in twisting arms and getting opinion. And I think at some point you got to get a legal answer to that. I know what your older city attorney would say. He wanted you to get rid of conditional uses and go permitted use.
And he lost.
and he certainly wouldn't go with interim. But yes, that, I put this on paper now, not because we resolved it.
Okay.
I did highlight, and I should have done that here, that you determine what it is. And that's easily changeable. It is. I did say, or I did highlight somewhere in here whether we had 3 or 1. And I'm assuming that we are going to be allowed by our ordinance to change that to go upwards or downwards. And So whatever your comfort level is. I don't think you're going to get 3 of them. I know you had a comfort level, why restrict it? But you could start with 1 and open it up. You could start with 10 and cut it back. That's my gut. But we'll get a legal opinion on that too, because Megan will have all of my questions.
So does it make any sense for us to even, I don't even know what we can talk about because there's like nothing is defined and everything requires a legal opinion, which we don't have tonight.
Well, we will get some legal answers by your next meeting. I don't know to what extent, but we'll simply say, we want to present those at our August 6th or 7th, whatever day it is, meeting, and have those available for at least preliminary discussion. And I think what you're going to get are opinions, not answers. And it'll be, well, the law, if Megan answers the same way the state did, the law allows you to have reasonable regulations as long as it doesn't prohibit a cannabis business or prevent the operation of a cannabis. I mean, what kind of an answer is that? And then the position that you take, Janet, is we're going to do all interim use permits, phooey on them, let somebody sue us, and then we'll get a final answer. You would not want to, and Jack and I have something in common. I worked in East Bethel before he did, and they had a controversial business, and they refused to issue regulations. They simply denied it. And when the judge overturned their decision, there were no regulations. And so you want to have all the regulations that you can in place. And if somebody challenges those, you want to make certain they're not overturning other valuable things. And that's part of this debate on how we may choose to regulate. I'm not going to argue with you. Do you remember me at the August meeting? I said this is a moving target, and from what I've reviewed so far, I'm not a happy camper because I don't have my own answers.
I know, it's frustrating, isn't it?
So what I'm going to do, and this was my last question. Gosh, it's not even 8 o'clock. My last question, we can stay as long as you want. I'll stay here till 10. My last question was, what is next? And I think for sure, we're going to share my anxiety and we're going to say, we want answers to these before our next meeting. It's up to you to invite the attorney to come in here and get that crosstalk. I don't hold your purse strings, so that's not for me to decide. But we will get that. I will begin structuring the component for licensing the cannabis retail in Chapter 4. And I think we ought to do the licensing. If we're going to be allowed to have annual fees for events, we may as well put it in that category, but then also issue the interim use permit on those. I will continue to dig into other ordinances, and I appreciate the city of St. Paul had the confidence in what they were doing to go ahead and adopt their ordinance. It's on the books, and they simply are on top of that with the number of city planners they have, with the number of inspectors that they have. And they, amongst a handful of other communities, are looking at this as new business in their community.
Yeah, they're trying to figure out how to pay for all the roads that they have to repair.
Any questions? Anybody else?
No, I mean, I just think that the last discussion that we had, we went through a lot of stuff, and I think we got the basis for like what we want in which of the zoning areas. That's something, and I don't know, maybe it would change. I don't think so, but I think we got at least a good start and on what we could with what we know so far.
I think you have a huge start, personally. When Jack called me and I'm at my cabin and my hip was bothering me and said, I want you to do this, I'm like, gosh. And then when I looked at the statutes and then saw the amendments to the statutes, it's a can of worms. It's a lot of work. I don't know, I've probably got 40, 50 hours. I have no idea into this already. And the only consolation is that's a fraction of what your attorney would charge you for that much time at work. I'm gonna double or triple that in this process. And so it doesn't make sense for a bunch of us to be doing the same thing. And if your city attorney is not representing any other municipal clients, you're gonna pay the full bill. When you work with multiple clients, you can distribute that bill to multiple clients. I mean, that's a good deal. And no, never mind, I'm not going there. So what I thought was I would attempt to expand this ordinance in the level of detail that allows the scrutiny of the city attorney. Not that they would do that for your October meeting, but fill in the gaps. I have some other resources to help me come up with other performance standards, but it's up to all of you with the questions to why aren't we doing this, or why did you do that? All the extra eyes make this really work. I think in the end, when we don't have firm answers, we're going to say we're going to allow maybe 4 events by an event organizer. Well, then you might have these people say that, no, they can be from Thief River Falls, the next one can be from Ely. You might get however many they've issued. No, there are no caps on event organizers. I just don't see this proliferating. I really don't. I mean, why? What do they gain? It is bringing different manufacturers together, and you don't have any. It's going to take years before people sit and say, did you try that leaf? And that's what goes on at these events. You've got multiple manufacturers or retailers with different products. They have to buy it on the spot and then take it home and use it because they're not allowed to use it there. And then they do what? They pick a favorite brand. Oh, I like Bud Light better than Miller. I just don't see this proliferating. But to me, I think you pick up a cap and you say you're going to allow them once a month or whatever. I think you could develop a standard and say you're going to require these to be in brick and mortar facilities, no circus environments. Somebody challenges you, there's your lawsuit, you're covered by the league, and you get an answer. That is an outcome. Unfortunately, we've gone through those steps in more than one instance when the legislation simply isn't clear. Or you believe strongly in the position that this is how we're going to approach it. Again, since you've got insurance, that's what it's for, and the league represents you, and you got a good chance of winning, or at least you'll get the answer. Do we want to go back? You were tied. I know not everybody's here, but we still got Jesse and Robin online. 3 or 1, that's where we were at the last meeting. It was a deadlock.
No, I think 3-1.
3-1 by 1.
3-1 out.
Is that where you want to start?
Well, that's what we voted on.
That's what we voted on, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I didn't have that in my notes.
3-1 out by 1 vote. Or the tiebreaker.
Yeah, one, we only have.
If you redo it, it'll be a dead heat because that one person is now off the planning commission.
Let's just stick with what we had. It was in the notes, wasn't
Yes,
it?
it's in our minutes.
Honestly,
It is. Yeah.
It did, yes, 3-1.
we're in work sessions until this gets adopted. You can change your mind on
could
any
change
and
our
all
mind.
of this. And I think you think about things that Janet's brought up, whether it's the number of businesses or how you're going to approve them. Conditional use permit, interim use permit. We certainly aren't going backwards, I'll use that term, and putting any of these as permitted. But you need to all talk about it. And again, Janet can twist your arm and give you her opinion, and I do not hesitate giving you my opinion. I mean,
You make it sound so punitive.
I know. But if I can get the alphabet for definitions, I'm going to get this. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm not opposed to that.
This is all fair, and as long as you don't violate open meeting requirements, you can talk about it amongst yourselves. So anything else you would want to see, knowing that it is going to be a couple of months before we're going to get all these answers? we agreed on licensing, we're going to have one retail. It's really going to diminish.
Three retail.
I mean, excuse me, 3. I was so fixed.
I can keep reminding you, by the way.
Not twisting his arm behind his back.
I was hoping she'd come to CUPs if I got one. No. All right, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for clarifying everything.
It's clear as mud, Ron, and that's why I'm here.
And it's not your fault.
No, it isn't.
It's not your fault.
And so Eleanor, Jack, and now Megan and I will be talking about all of this, and I will expand the draft ordinance. And again, once it gets into this form, it's a lot easier to do, and you say, wait a minute, it is 1, it's not 3, it's whatever. But it's good to know the state or our attorney will let you know that, yes, you can bump that up to 3 or unlimited or what you want to do. Both Minneapolis and St. Paul are sitting there doing the division, 285 population, 365 divided by, and they're going, well, we want all of them. And the state's put caps on these at 50.
Yep.
That those caps are going to be exploded if the cities are saying, we want these. And if you consider how hard it is for you to get your own restaurant, your own grocery store, other things, why would somebody invest in a low household, low population market for something like this?
Probably not.
I don't see it, but by golly, we're going to be prepared for it.
Dean, in one of the things I think that was in here that was asked, and I think you were going to follow up on it, and I haven't heard you, at least I don't think I've heard you address it yet, is whether or not we could restrict cultivation to indoor only.
I'm going to say that we say it indoor only.
Okay.
I don't read in the statute where it says you have to allow both indoor and outdoor cultivation. It says you have to allow cultivation. That's my position. And so the city of St. Paul said, well, we'll allow cultivation in most districts except they're residential. Well, you're holding. So we've agreed we're not doing that. But I think your approach is that you restrict it to indoor. I think I may have said that in one of these, but indoor cultivation. Yep.
Yeah, I was just looking back at the minutes where it said you were going to check to see whether it was legal to say that.
Well, we'll find out what legal opinion or response you get to that. But I'd say on something like that, you're not an ag community. And, you know, Rob hit it right on the head in the first meeting. Nobody's growing this stuff outside to compete with the kind of pot that's developed now. Those days are gone. I mean, it's just not there. Maybe in Hawaii, you grow some exclusive stuff, but it's indoor and it's year round. And I've said in here, without saying you can't have hoop buildings and whatever, I just said you got to meet our building design standards. So the exemption that you have for burgeons, which somebody might come in and try to say is an exception, they are an ag business. We tried to make them do an environmental review. An ag business was exempt from environmental review. They had over 1 million square feet.
Oh,
We
wow.
said that triggers an EAW. Well, actually triggered an EIS. They were exempt. These businesses, by this state statute, are regarded and taxed commercially, all of them, including cultivation. So we're going to have commercial building standards. And I think we ought to have commercial event standards. That's where I'm going with it. No tents. I mean,
Yeah, I agree.
That's silly, yeah.
that just seems silly. You don't have a lot of vacant buildings, you're not going to get one. But if you had a micro business or a retailer and they were in a place like where the exercise guy was, and you got an extra space in there, that's the kind of place that somebody might come.
So to Dean, I had a question in kind of regards to what Sue was saying about Heydays. Well, I was out at Heydays this last go around in the beginning of September, and they had these pop-up things everywhere where they were selling THC cartridges, they were selling gummies, all that type of stuff. How was that being legal without having all this set forth. I mean, to me, that's a pop-up thing.
When that.
And they were allowed to do it inside the event.
Yeah, and so you first of all have to, the law is it has to be 21 restricted age. So people that are selling 3.2 or full liquor can sell any of those low potencies.
Sure.
The pop-ups outside, I think you have a case that they don't meet any of the requirements where you're carding, where, you know, you've got security, where it's, the product is behind the counter. So I don't know how prevalent that is. I've never seen that.
Sure.
The state has announced.
I bet there was like 6 or 8 of them I saw out there on that facility.
Were they all low potency?
No.
No, they were some that were the high test stuff.
Yeah. I was surprised, right?
And they are all at risk. The state is going to create a licensing program for the low potency. When that law was passed 2 years, 3 years ago, we didn't do anything. So any retailer that monitors the 21 age and security and whatever is allowed to do that. And that's what I said in the beginning of the meeting, a decision you need to make. Do you want to get into the low potency licensing business? St. Paul's got 178 of them, and if they can get $1,000 a year annual license fee, that pays for the inspector. I don't like going down that road, but I'm telling you, that's what some are doing. So right now, the model ordinance put out by the state says it is optional for cities to go in and regulate the low potency. When it first came out, it said we can't interfere. It didn't say we couldn't license. Other big cities that are geared up and have licensing staffs are doing that. You have to decide, do you want to get into that? You haven't got any businesses. You collect $1,000 from Holiday and from Love's because and then you got to check up on them. Do you want to do that? That's a policy decision. Don't let me influence it, but I don't think many communities are going to go in and start licensing the low potency. Wherever 3.2 is allowed, they can do it. I mean, wherever regular. And so you're already licensing that component, but you don't have anything, you're not saying anything that's not alcohol content or tobacco for that matter. You license tobacco. So if you want to get into that business, you'd have to add that as another standard. We have to wait until the state does that, so that's not something we have to do in the next 5-6 months. And again, you have to decide, are there enough businesses where you want to add that to the regulation? And until I go through and on the basis of what you have for alcohol sales and tobacco, and really cross-reference, look at it, think about it, it may be so simple that you piggyback a low potency with that. You incorporate it in the same fashion. I just don't know. But we have to think about it. And the state said they are going to begin a registration program. That's what St. Paul calls it. Might not even be a license. And if you noticed in some previous handouts, the rules that the state has come out with, what we're allowed to charge is limited to $500 for retail, micro, and maybe one other, and then an annual $1,000 fee. I don't see anything in the statute that gives us the authority to collect money on any of these other businesses. So why would you regulate them? I mean, just give them their IUP or CUP. And you wash your hands of it, and it's regulated by the state. So there's a lot of stuff, and I need you to ask questions because all of a sudden I start getting familiar with something, and I lose the fact that, okay, I finally figured that out. And if you're out there wondering what is going on, just ask. It is relevant. I'll leave that up to the chair.
Oh, gosh, that can't be up to me. I mean, this is not the right time.
No, Josh, if you'll talk to me after the meeting, we'll find out what you want to do, and we can get you on the agenda for another meeting.
It was just a matter of the Minnesota Constitution, in the Constitution under taxation, there's no license required for products from your farms. So I mean,
Yeah.
So and that, I was just looking at as far as how do you keep it simple and eliminate all that, but then you've got the access to like 35 as far as like the port of, so if you just control that as like the port of entry within Columbus.
Yeah.
And then you
Can you and I discuss this after the meeting?
Yeah.
Thank you.
For sure. Sorry. I was just trying to keep it simple, like trying to figure like how do you keep all this stuff, like simplify it down and just, I don't know.
Better watch it, you'll get elected talking like that.
Okay.
Is there any more discussion about this?
Heck no.
So we're ready to move on. Yes?
Yes.
Planning Commissioners report. Anyone? I suppose that's just
No, I don't have anything.
good. Robin?
I'm good.
All right, I got nothing. City Administrator Planning Zoning Tech report.
I have nothing to add unless Ellie has something she wants to contribute. Oh, well, Ellie brought up something too for those that you may or may not be aware. Barb resigned from the Planning Commission, and her resignation was effective September the 30th. So we do have a candidate that will be appearing before the Personnel Committee next week to interview, and if she looks like she's a good fit, then we may have a replacement ready for that at the next Planning Commission meeting.
Thank you.
A reminder for everybody that it is Columbus tomorrow, and everyone, all of the planning commissioners and city council members are invited to that. It is from 4 to 6 at Running Aces Hotel.
Great.
If anyone
Thank you. Anything else? Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So move.
I'll second.
I'll call for the vote.
Ron, aye?
Sue, I. Janet, I.
Scott, aye.
Rob, aye.
Rob and I.
Jesse, aye.
And Bethany, aye. Meeting adjourned.